You are listening to 17 Carat K-Pop. For more information about this show, as well as the other show I do, How to Stan, visit 17caratkpop.weebly.com and subscribe to my newsletter at howtostan.substack.com. K-pop interviews, album reviews, and more. Subscribing is free, but if you want to continue to support my work, feel free to donate. Click the Support the Show button on the homepage at 17caratkpop.weebly.com. Hi everybody! Welcome back to 17 Carat K-Pop. Today, a breakdown of the past, present, and future of K-dramas. And yes, this episode also includes a little primer about Squid Game. This is just part of a series of episodes I plan to do, diving into the history of Korean television, music shows, reality shows, etc. So first up, let's talk K-dramas. Let's start super basic. What are K-dramas? It's kind of like the term K-pop in the sense that it's just a really broad, general term. K-pop encompasses Korean R&B, rock, rap, etc. K-drama encompasses a huge variety of genres as well. Romance, comedy, suspense, mystery, etc. They sometimes are called Korean soap operas instead, but again, that's kind of a reductive term. But they do take some character dynamics and storytelling elements from soap operas. They tend to be just one season long, with a really clear, from the start, number of episodes. The story arc has a clear beginning and end. This season of a show can actually be as long as several seasons of Western shows. Most often, a K-drama runs around 16 to 24 episodes, but some have well over 50, so it varies a lot. These shows are highly influential and develop a passionate fan base across Asia and beyond. For example, Sandcastle, back in the 1980s, was so popular that it wasn't going to air during the Olympics, but then it did end up airing during the Olympics because the canceled coverage triggered just a storm of complaints filed with NBC for the decision. The 1980s and 90s are also actually linked to changes in tap water usage because everyone went home to watch the show, and a reduction of vehicle traffic on the roads. Like the I Love Lucy effect, where stores would shut down in anticipation of all their customers rushing home to watch the show. Remember, this was before you could choose what time you wanted to watch your show. Famous lines continue to be recited today from K-dramas like, "I'm going to destroy everything," from The Trap of Youth, "Am I Trembling Now?" That's a line from Sandglass. So they're very influential. And why? What is the appeal? One thing is they have a lot of emotional depth to the characters and stories, very thoughtful, layered content. They also can change in real time. I've talked endlessly on the show before about this new era of fan expectations, where there's more of a reciprocal nature, a two-way street. Fans tell idols what they want to see, and the idols do as the fans say. That real-time feedback is a huge part of K-dramas as well, because sometimes they will actually, mid-season, change up character arcs, storylines, etc., based on if the audience is loving it or hating it. The appeal also is bigger just because access to watch this stuff is bigger. The push of the Hallyu wave, Netflix entering Korea, Disney Plus will come to Korea next month. Some K-dramas actually reportedly sold for as low as $1 an episode to Latin America to broadcast it there. So it was considered way cheaper than the telenovas that were all the rage at the time. The other variable to consider is that the number of viewers is so massive because it is probably averaging more viewers per household than other shows. You don't have to watch this show by yourself. Very relatively family-friendly, way more often than Western shows. A very PG rating really expands your audience. So what was the very first K-drama? There's a little bit of a debate about what technically counts as the first, but what is called officially the first Korean drama is Death Row Prisoner, a movie that came out in 1956. KBS TV then started in 1961. In the 1960s, TV was not something anyone everywhere in the world was getting their hands on. It was definitely resigned to wealthier people. And most of the content was educational and focused on what the government controlled. A lot of content that could be considered propaganda. The first TV drama series, sometimes, people say that one would be Backstreet of Seoul from 1962. There was a rise of different Korean broadcast companies competing with each other for eyeballs, and that really kicked into high gear in the 70s. The competition especially heated up with the introduction and popularity of daily soaps, Snowfall being the first one, that came out in 1968. KBS, MBC, and TBC were super competitive with each other. In 1969, there was a ban lifted on profiting from ads that played during your show. And after that ban was lifted, TV networks threw themselves into lots of overt promotional campaigning, unlike ever before. This rise in overt promotional tactics, and the expanded audience though, brought with it a rise in government scrutiny of what they were doing. The industry has gone through waves of being bold in its expression and fearing censorship. In the early 80s, South Korea became the 81st country to start airing in color instead of black and white. The 80s was also when K-dramas were drawing a lot of inspiration from Japanese dramas, and they decided to follow Japan's lead in hoping for younger audiences than before, and focusing on youthful storylines, young characters. The 80s was also when, this fact I found super interesting, Korean-owned supermarkets were on the rise in immigrant communities in the United States. And they would sell K-dramas on VHS or DVD. And because many Latin American immigrants worked at these Korean-owned supermarkets, that's part of the reason Latin Americans have become a prominent K-drama fan base. The 80s and 90s were a time full of Korean network executives taking trips overseas, and these business trips inspired them and really changed and zoomed out more globally their approach to making content. Yet another show that is debated as the first official K-drama came around in 1997, What is Love? Wish Upon a Star is also in the same conversation for that time period. In 1993, South Korea elected its first civilian president in over 3 years. The culture sector then thrived and had this new sense of relief and freedom to create without any punishment or censorship, relatively. This corresponded again with this rise in globalization and international travel. Around this time was also when the show Jealousy premiered. This was a huge groundbreaking show. There's so many shows I could name that would be considered landmark milestone moments for K-dramas, but truly, you can't have that conversation without giving this one example, and that's Jealousy. It was connected to merch purchases and just buying habits in general, unlike people had ever seen before in fandom activity. Remember, this was the 90s still. It also led networks to realize the power of marketing when your show has a soundtrack, and the impact of young, relatable characters. Several cable channels were added to the offerings in 95, and again, as the number of channels increased, so too did the sense of feeling like you need to edge out competition. The rise in international interest in this drama brought with it more encouragement to go forward with youth-focused K-dramas and more soapy stuff. In the 2000s also, crime-based stories and mysteries rose in popularity. K-dramas also started taking more storytelling elements from Hollywood, like the action scenes in movies and stuff. Dramas seemed to focus less in the 90s and 2000s than they had in previous decades on historical storytelling, and shifted more to present-day, relatable stories. Although I will note that historical dramas made a semi-comeback in popularity with this trend called Fusion Seiguk, where fictional stories are told about real people. In 2003, Winter Sonata premiered in Japan and reached tons of viewers, particularly among the middle-aged female demographic. That was also a big year for the genre thanks to Jewel in the Palace, which is considered the first major global K-drama hit, eventually airing in 91 countries, and it was so popular actually in places you wouldn't expect. In Iran, it got 90% ratings. It basically is responsible for triggering a ripple effect of mini Hallyu waves in countries it had not previously been. Winter Sonata was also credited with a rise in the Hallyu Wave in Japan and caused a reported 35.5% rise in Japanese tourists to South Korea in 2004. Over a 35% rise in the tourists going because of this show they love. The power of K-dramas globally and the passion of their fans was further on display in 2005 when President Roh Moo-hyun visited Mexico, and a group of K-drama fans held a rally outside of his hotel just because they wanted to convince him to get some of their favorite actors to come visit Mexico soon. The 2010s became a major pivotal moment for the romantic fantasy genre. More fantastical special effects and concepts became all the rage. This coincided with that decline in interest in period dramas. The 2010s is also when the Hallyu Wave really started surging in China. And it became much easier in general in the past decade to watch K-dramas because there are things like Viki and Drama Fever with English subtitles. By 2014, approximately 18 million Americans were watching K-dramas. And in 2017, about half of foreign tourists to Korea went because they cited K-dramas and films as inspiring them to travel there. As always, I will link to these studies on my site, and all these surveys show that K-dramas have significantly impacted everything from fans' consumer habits to their lifestyle choices and shopping choices to where they go on vacation. In 2018, Warner Brothers shut down Drama Fever after acquiring it. But Netflix could then step in and fill the void and started investing heavily in Korean content. Netflix premiered The Zombie Show Kingdom back in January 2019. You can now watch a bunch of K-dramas on Netflix with over 30 languages getting subtitles. And now, Netflix has announced plans to invest $500 million in Korean content going forward. There's this thing now too called the Netflix effect, where K-dramas now it seems more common to give them more than one season. Some other recent trends: North American subscriptions to the streaming app Viki in the year 2019 to 2020 rose 42%. You'll notice this coincided with the release and buzz about Parasite and Minari, plus lockdowns I'm sure helped the subscriber growth too. In 2020, viewership of Netflix's Korean programming increased fourfold compared to 2019. Now, Apple TV Plus is planning to air 2 original K-dramas. Disney Plus has partnered with South Korean producers for more content. More and more webtoon-based dramas are being made. And now, the shoe's on the other foot, and American producers want to copy Korean concepts. The Good Doctor, Masked Singer, there are a ton of shows that actually originated in South Korea and were just rebooted by North Americans. We cannot have this conversation completely without talking about the massive success of Squid Game, which is officially the most watched show in Netflix's history. By a lot, actually, as of recording time. Bridgerton was the most watched ever, with 82 million viewers. Squid Game now has 111 million. Obviously, being a player in Squid Game is one of the most searched for Halloween costumes this year. Versions of the games played on the show have turned into TikTok challenges. Netflix even had to censor out a phone number in the show because so many people who had watched the show were bombarding that woman with phone calls. Searches for Vans slip-ons, like the ones worn on the show, rose by 7,800%. That's right, 7,800% uptick in searches for Vans slip-ons. And, fun fact, in previous episodes, we talked about this South Korean broadband versus Netflix lawsuit, basically boiling down to who should have to pay when there's this extra surge, and we have to learn to accommodate this extra surge in streaming traffic. That was actually filed with Squid Game as a prime example of, hey, our servers can't take this much, who's gonna have to pay for taking care of this? It's just massive. It's literally broken the internet. And why is that? Let me break down what happens, spoilers ahead, and then I think it will make sense. Squid Game is a dystopian show very much like the Hunger Games, where only one, the winner, will survive when this is all over. I know the description I'm about to give of the show is super simplified, so just know there's a lot more context to it. Each character has a lot of backstory, a lot to dissect about their decisions, but I'm just going to keep this pretty concise. So this is a game with over 450 players, all in need of cash, and they're playing a series of children's games, like Tug of War, Red Rover, etc., in pursuit of the cash prize. During the games, when you lose, you die, and each death raises the value of that cash prize you're seeking. There is one way out of this barbaric game that does not involve death. If the majority of players get all on the same page and vote to end the game, everyone can walk free. No one gets the cash prize, but everyone can walk away safe and sound. But you can't get a majority of the players to vote on that because they all desperately need and want that money, and think it's worth the risk for themselves. Episode 1 is when they play a lethal game of red light, green light. In episode 2, a narrow majority does vote to end the game, but many end up returning anyway, and playing anyway, because they are all so desperate. One character is just avoiding arrest, one's in severe gambling debt, one just wants to play because if you've got a terminal illness, why not? Etc. Lots of different reasons why people are so desperate they go back anyway. In episode 3, alliances start forming, and they play this Dalgona game. Then we find out that the players are on this remote island. Episode 4 is the deadly game of Tug of War. In episode 5, the big revelation is that this game has been taking place for the past 30 years. In episode 6, they partner up for marble games. This has actually been linked to, in real life, a rise in sales of marbles. The big twist in episode 6 is that you're told to partner up, and then you find out you have to turn on your partner. You win, and your partner dies, or vice versa. Episode 7 is particularly immoral and awful. That's when a bunch of VIPs show up to place their bets and just watch the games. All these wealthy people, for their own amusement, watching these people in need of cash fight each other literally to the death over it. In episode 8, the main character finds out the guy who is monitoring this whole game, Frontman, is his brother, who actually won the game previously. In episode 9, Gi-hun, the technical winner, although also the game never officially ended, it's a long story. But anyway, he gets the cash prize, but doesn't use it. He's quite distraught. He finds out that the game actually started thanks to this super bored, super rich dude who just wanted to be entertained watching these, in his eyes, super poor people fight it out. And he's so racked with guilt over everything that's happened, how wrong it feels, and he decides to dedicate the rest of his life to exposing what's happening. Exposing the people recruiting people who are desperate into this lethal game. And he just wants to put an end to the game. So he vows to make that his life's mission. That's where the story ends. Initially, there had been no plans for a second season. But due to the extreme popularity of the show, now they're considering it. And you can see with that final episode how they could do another season, where he's really trying to lead a rebellion against these wealthy, awful people. It's definitely got a lot of the same social commentary as The Hunger Games, although I would argue Squid Game addresses that stuff in a better and more interesting way, because it's not just the wealthy laughing it up watching poor people fight it out. It's all that, but they're fighting it out for a cash prize, making up for the debt they're in. So then the finger pointing about where the problem started is less clear-cut. It's not just on those wealthy viewers, but what policies led to all that debt in the first place. Lots of political and economic connotations here. A call to reassess certain negative aspects of capitalism. To me, there's also a lot to unpack with the fact these are kids' games. The games you're meant to play just as an innocent, happy-go-lucky kid. But it turns into this deadly war, basically, against your fellow community members. It's this weaponization of a sense of gullibleness, a sense of childlike innocence, unawareness of these sinister motives that gets weaponized against these people in their dire situations. So there are so many layers to this story. The cash prize aspect of it, the actual children's games aspect of it. In general, having characters turn on each other has a lot there to reflect on too, about how people treat each other. And this is ultimately why I think Squid Game really struck a chord, and Korean television is striking a chord worldwide. It's because it doesn't matter what language you speak, to feel like a piece of art, a movie, a TV show, etc., leaves you in thought. Watching a scene unfold can leave you in a lot of thought about what it says, even without subtitles. Same with K-pop music, it's this universal way of connecting with people through the arts. Finding ways to utilize the media to send a message that is gripping, regardless of language. And that's the thing with K-dramas. They often do touch on very universal themes. Inequality, justice or injustice, alliances, backstabbing. It takes things we've all experienced, felt, been through, and just kicks it up a notch for TV or movie's sake. But really, they address issues that are not so specific that you can only like this programming if you are a native to the country it comes from. Sure, they have very culturally specific details in them, but at the end of the day, they also show the many ways that humanity is kind of all in the same boat when it comes to certain emotions and, broadly speaking, experiences. Plus, I think K-dramas have the same appeal as K-pop in the sense of once you're in the rabbit hole, you can't get out. You don't become a non-fan afterwards. You find like-minded fellow fans you start chatting with all the time online. You start gearing up for new episodes that you're excited for. You start reading subtitles and learn to get over any pathetic previous anti-subtitle stance you had. You just don't view that as annoying. You just do that as a habit. You keep the subtitles on. It just changes you, I think, for the better, and helps you see and appreciate things in other cultures as well. The power of media to influence fans is really interesting to me. And I think in all the ways we've just discussed, K-dramas are perfectly positioned to continue television's trends and greater goals. That is a short history of the world of K-dramas. We will talk about them a lot more, and lots more programming on the next few episodes of the show, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I just want to thank you all for listening, and I will talk to you all again very soon.